Greetings. Today's session will cover how to manage a lending request in CLOVER. I first access my CLOVER system. For purposes of today's demonstration, I will be acting as lending staff at the Aldrich Public Library. I log into the system as a staff user and click the Submit button. This takes me into CLOVER as a staff person authorized to manage ILLs. I first click on the staff dashboard link, and that takes me to a menu of all of the available modules within CLOVER. To manage my lending requests, I click on ILL Admin. I can access those requests by either browsing them by title, zeroing in on a specific request number, or looking at all of my lending requests in Request Manager. Let's start with Title Browse. If I click on Title Browse, it brings up a listing of all of the requests by title, and I can scroll through the list, or I can start typing one of the words in the title, and it will zero in on that particular title or the titles that match whatever criteria I've typed in thus far. By clicking on the title name, I then zero in on the full request. At this point, I can take action on the request, but more on that in a bit. To exit a request, I can use the Close tab, or I can use the small X in the top right corner. If I use Close, it takes me back to the previous screen. If I use the X, it takes me back to the staff dashboard. Alternatively, I can also zero in on a specific request by typing in the request number if I know it. I click Submit. If it can't find the request, it tells me such. If I type in a valid request number and click Submit, it takes me again into that full request, at which point I can take action on that request. If I want to see all of my requests that are with my library as the lender, I can click on Request Manager. All of the statuses that I see on the left-hand side of the screen are requests that involve my library as the borrower in the transaction. Those are covered in a separate demonstration. For lending purposes, I'm concerned with those statuses that appear on the right-hand side of the screen, where it says Manage Lender Request. If a status currently has no request in it, it will appear in regular type with a zero next to it, meaning there are no requests in that status. If there is one request or several requests in a given status, you will see the number of requests in that status along with that status being a clickable link. The first thing I need to look at when I am a lender are the new requests in my pending status. So I click on Pending. These are requests that have arrived to me because a borrowing library has requested this item. I can click on the title, and it takes me into the full request. I can scroll down and see all of the particulars about this request. If I cannot supply this request, either because it came to me and I actually do not own the item, or it came to me and I own the item, but it's currently checked out by one of my own patrons, or maybe it's damaged, whatever the reason, I would simply indicate will not supply. I can then tell the system why I'm not supplying it. You'll see that it defaults to omit reason. If I pull up this drop-down menu, you can see there are a whole host of reasons about why I cannot supply the item. It helps Clover if you can identify why you're not supplying the item. If it's a temporary issue, for example, the item is in use, on loan, the request may circle back after it's exhausted all other potential lenders in hopes that this time around you may be able to fill the request. If the reason is more terminal in that, oops, I owned the item, but it's now lost, the request will not circle back to you because it knows you will not be able to fill it based on the reason you listed here. Once you've chosen your status change and the reason why, you can click Submit to effect that change. I'm not going to do so quite yet because I want to talk a little bit more about what my options are here when a request arrives in pending. If I choose to not supply it, I simply tell the system why not, and I click Submit, and I'm done. It automatically routes to the next lender in line. If I do wish to supply the item, I can go straight to Ship Status and scan or type in the item barcode of my item. This is an optional field. You do not have to include it. If you're not sure when you get the pending request, you can either leave the request in pending while you check the stacks or check your circulation system to find out if in fact the item is available, and then when it is, call up the request in Clover and mark it shipped. Or you can put it into Will Supply in Process, and it sort of holds the request with you as a lender until you've determined what you wish to do. We will go ahead and say we will supply this item. I don't have the barcode handy, so I'm going to leave that field blank. And all I need to do is click Submit. It marks the request shipped. And now I actually put the item out for delivery to the borrowing library. That might be via a courier service. I might drop it in the mail, whatever method I'm using to physically ship the item to the borrowing library, and it's on its way. The next step is with that of the borrowing library. Back to our request manager. If I've elected to put a request that was in pending and I marked it as I potentially will supply this request, this item, it's sort of in an in-process status. A note of caution here, if you as a lender put a request in the will supply in process status, it will stay there until you take action again. So use this status judiciously and make sure that if you change a pending request to will supply in process, that you then follow up and either determine that you can't supply it and mark it will not supply with the corresponding reason and click Submit. That will automatically route the request onto the next lender in line. Or you've temporarily held a request and will supply while you are checking your stacks, and now you've determined that sure enough you can ship it. And in this case I do have the barcode, so I type or scan it in and I click Submit. I'm navigating by using the Close button at the top right, which takes me back to the previous screen, Alternatively, I can use the little X in the top right corner to take me back to the staff dashboard, at which time I can re-enter the request manager. Once you've elected to supply an item and you've actually marked it shipped, the next steps in the process belong to the borrower. Eventually, they will receive your item, they'll circulate it to their patron, the patron will return it, at which time the borrowing library physically returns the item to you, the lender. When those items cross your desk, it's time to update CLOVER and let the system and the borrowing library know that you have in fact received those items back. You'll find those items in your returned status. It means the borrowing library is finished with it and has marked it returned. As the lender, you'll want to go into the return status to mark those items checked in. That's an important step of the process because that's what brings it to complete status on the borrowing side. Otherwise, the borrowing library will think there might be an issue with the return of the item. I can change the status of the request sitting in return status one by one and make the adjustments on a case-by-case basis. Or if I happen to see in today's shipment that I received all 5 of these items, I could change them all at once using the top menu item. And if I click check in here, it makes that adjustment down here. I could also undo one if one did not come in, but the others did. So it's just a matter of ease of workflow, which approach you want to take. I do need to submit any change that I've made to those statuses, and the effect is immediate. I now see fewer requests in rule of supply, fewer requests in return status. Once in a while, you might see a request in one of these other statuses. If you do, the example here is a renew pending. It means that the borrowing library received your item, and it's time for them to send it back, but their patron would like it a little longer. So via CLOVER, they've asked you if they could renew it. And at this point, you can either accept the renewal or reject the renewal. And we'll say that we'll go ahead and accept the renewal and graciously allow that borrowing library to hold on to the item a bit longer. At any step in the process, I'm heading back to our return status. The only options available to you in the drop-down are the functions that make sense at that point in the process. So for an item that has pretty much completed its rounds and it's in the return status, at that point, all you as the lender can really do is either acknowledge that you have in fact gotten the item back, or it never made it back, and in fact, it's lost. Be careful about marking an item lost too quickly because there is no way to undo that status change once you've made it. So do allow lots and lots of time before you put an item that should have come back to your library into lost status. So again, I logged into the system as a staff person. I clicked on Staff Dashboard, ILL Admin. I can zero in on a specific request by searching by title or by keying in the exact request number, or I can just go to my request manager and focus on those statuses that are on the right-hand side of the screen. These are the requests where I, as the lender, need to take action. A quick note about the Request Manager screen. If I scroll down, I'll see some requests below the line that speak to items awaiting trading partner response. These are requests where I am the lender in the transaction, but the current action item is with the borrower. There is nothing I need to do with the requests that appear on the lending side of the screen, but below the line. It simply gives me a window into those requests in case I don't have a title handy or a request number handy. I can still click on the request status and see those requests, but the action item is not mine to take. That concludes our review of how to manage an ILL request from the lending perspective in Clover. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.